All right, so I'm just going to repeat myself a little bit here. So we have 3 weeks left in this class. We have 2 weeks of regular class meetings, and then we have our finals week. And so what that means essentially is that we're not going to have enough time to finish the outlines and have everybody deliver their speech during a normal class session. So what we're going to do is the outlines are going to be due on Tuesday of next week, and we're going to talk about the outlines today. Hopefully you've already picked your topic and even started to do some of the research like I asked you to do on Thursday. And so today we're going to talk about how to make the outline. I'll give you an example skeleton outline with just the basic steps, and then I'll also give you an example that's already been completed of a persuasive speech. And that, again, your version will be due Tuesday. On Tuesday, I'll take a look at them. I'll try to give you some feedback, and actually in class, we'll do some peer review. So we'll take each other or take a turn looking at each other's and finding the problems. And then they'll be able to be resubmitted on Thursday. So that's the last normal day of class. And then what I'm going to have you do is actually film your persuasive speech and upload it onto Canvas. So the good news for you is you're not going to have to give it in front of a live audience. You're going to get to give the speech and, you know, record it however many times it takes you to do a good job and turn in the one that you think is the best version. The bad news for me is I'm going to have to watch all of those on my own time outside of school time, but that's all right. That'll work. And so we'll talk a little bit about the logistics of recording yourself. Hopefully all of you have a phone that you could do it. I'm not really worried about the quality of the you know, the visuals or anything. As long as I can hear and understand what you're saying, then that'll be fine. And we'll talk about how to upload those so that I can watch them. And then on the very final day of class, you know, we'll just have like basically we'll meet and do kind of goodbyes. So we'll have a little, I don't know, maybe class party, as it were, with you can bring your own, you know, beverages or whatever, non-alcoholic, of course. And we'll just kind of hang out, talk to each other, say goodbye. And then that'll be it. So again, the last 2 graded assignments are your outline for the persuasive speech and sending me a filmed persuasive speech that I can watch and grade after the class is over. Other than that, all the points are in. I put the group grades in today, so you should be able to see that as well as your total cumulative grade at this point up to now. I think I have a couple of discussion grades to finish off, but that's fine. We'll work that out. If anybody has any issues with or know they're going to have some issues recording their speech, go ahead and send me an email, and we'll figure out an alternative method to that. Maybe we'll meet for, you know, by Zoom or do it some other way. But hopefully that'll just be a few people so we don't have too many problems. All right, so first I'm going to turn to talking about the persuasive outline. And so we talked last week about how a persuasive speech will generally be between 6 to 8 minutes, and it will have 5 components. So obviously, just like you would be when you're writing an essay in English, there's, you know, pretty familiar. We're going to have the introduction, body sections, and conclusion. And for your body sections, we will have 3 body sections. So that'll be introduction, body section 1, body section 2, body section 3, and your conclusion. All right. So we'll go ahead and let me show you the outline. Okay, so you all should be able to see this screen now. And again, this is the skeleton version of the outline. So we're going to go through first the introduction. And actually, you're not going to have anything written here next to the introduction. So your first words will start in the attention getter. So an attention getter is essentially one of the ways that you get your audience interested in your topic when you first are starting out your speech. And there's really not a lot of limiting factors in terms of what the attention getter can be. It could be a famous quote from someone. It could be the lyrics to a song. It could be the beginning of a joke. It could be statistics that you find in your research that are kind of alarming or that bring our attention to the subject. And this is really also the place where you could bring up your own personal examples. So someone asked me before, Can we use our personal experience as evidence? And the answer to that is no. Your own personal experience, most of the time, unless you're an expert or some kind of credible person on the topic, is not going to be relevant to being supporting evidence for your topic. However, those personal stories actually make really good attention getters because it gets people interested in your topic, and it kind of gets them excited to hear what it is that you're going to be talking to them about. So a couple of things to think about for the attention getter. A lot of times when we're like watching television, we get right to the end of something that happens as we're transitioning into a commercial, right? And that thing that happens right before the commercial is exciting. Someone walks in the room and it's a twist, but we don't understand exactly what's happening. And then it goes to commercial. And the reason they do that is because they want us to stick around after the commercial to see what it is that we missed. What is it that they're alluding to? What is it that they're kind of drawing our attention towards? And so the attention getter should be very much like that, in that it captures our interest, but it doesn't actually give us all the information we need. It creates what we call information hunger. And if you'll notice, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, we also end our speech with the attention getter. And so if you want to think about it, the first attention getter essentially is that moment right before the commercial. And then the rest of our speech is the commercial, the thing that people are going to be listening to. And then that final attention getter is when we come back from commercial and reveal why that original attention getter was important, or what the finality of that is. Another way to think about it is that we create a interest in the attention getter here, and then we bring finality in the attention getter here. And it's also important to recognize that these attention getters, both at the beginning and end, should be connected. They should be the same subject. What we're really trying to do is create this idea in the audience's mind that we've come full circle, that we've completed something, and that gives them an idea that the speech has come to its logical conclusion. So, for instance, when I was starting my college career, I did my very first persuasive speech on air pollution. And so I started off with an anecdote, which is a hypothetical story that is related to the topic. And I said something to the effect of, imagine it's the first day of summer and you go to the beach, it's a beautiful day, you have your bathing suit on, you put your blanket down or your towel down, and you look around to see how amazing the day is and how sunny it is, and you take a deep breath and you choke on all the smog in the air. Right? So that was my original attention getter. Then at the end, I came back to that by saying something to the effect of, so next time you go to the beach, remember, don't breathe too deeply. It could be your last breath. And so that was just, again, tying that original attention getter back into the conclusion attention getter. Now, after your attention getter, you're going to jump into your thesis statement. And your thesis statement is the most important statement of your entire speech. And it's basically the one that resembles what you turned in on the discussion board. It is a one-sentence, concise statement of exactly what it is you hope to accomplish in the speech. So for instance, I could say, in this speech, I will persuade my audience, in this speech, I will persuade you that we should reform the 3 strikes law of California. Or in this speech, I will persuade you that we should legalize marijuana in all 50 states. Or in this speech, I will persuade you that students should get free tuition for college. So again, you know exactly what the whole point of my speech is after hearing the thesis statement. This is again where you want to avoid including things like and. So you don't want to bifurcate or create 2 different topics with this statement. You want your audience to understand exactly what the point is of your speech and why you're here today. So the thesis statement should be very short, it's only 1 sentence, and it is clear and concise. It tells the audience what you plan to persuade them. Then as you get into the thesis explanation, you're going to be expanding on that a little bit. And first, you're going to give us some background information. You're going to give us some context about your topic. Why is it that your topic is important? What is it that has led up to your topic becoming important? What is the history of your topic, right? What is something important that's going on with your topic right now? And then that leads you into significance. So after you've created the context for the speech, the basic information we need to understand to know what your speech is going to be about, you're going to tell us why it's important. And there's three basic levels of importance that you're trying to create. The first is that you're trying to connect it to the individuals in your audience. Why is it important to me to listen to your speech? How is it affecting me, right? So for instance, if you're talking about a speech that is for free college tuition, well, all of the college students in your class are going to be very interested in that because they're paying tuition, presumably for classes, and your speech might impact them on an individual level. The second level of significance is if it doesn't affect the person who's listening, maybe it affects someone that they love, a family member, a friend, someone close to them. And so maybe it's a speech about giving senior citizens free healthcare or something like that. Well, you might not be a senior citizen, but we almost all have someone in our life that we love who does fall into that category. And so it would be important to us to listen to that speech topic. And then the third level of significance, if you can't find a way to connect it to the individual who's listening, if you can't find a way to connect it to somebody that they love, then you're basically going with the third form, which is that as a citizen or a member of this society, it's important to us, right? So maybe it's not connected to anybody I love or myself, but it's generally important information because I'm a member of this society. So in the introduction, your background and significance are going to be the biggest parts of your introduction. This is going to take the most time out of this whole section. And then you're going to transition into the preview. In the preview, you're basically going to list the topic of your 3 body sections. So for instance, I would say something like, in this speech, first, I will tell you why this is a problem. Second, I will explain to you how the law contributes to this or is a cause of this problem. And finally, I'll tell you how my solution will fix this problem altogether, right? So you're giving me 1, 2, 3, my first body section, my second body section, and my third body section, and giving me the topics of those 3 body sections. So just like the thesis statement, the preview is formulated. It's already formulated for you. You just basically fill in the blanks. First, I'm going to talk about this. Second, I'm going to talk about this. And third, I'm going to talk about this. Okay? Ultimately, that takes you through your entire introduction. Okay? And then that should be between a minute to a minute and 15 seconds total to do your entire introduction. Intention getter, thesis statement, thesis explanation, and preview. Okay? The next thing here is a transition statement. So once you're done introducing us to your topic, you're going to transition into the 3 body sections, or I'm sorry, you're going to transition into the first body section. And transition statements are very important. They're important when you're writing an essay because you want the reader to understand that you're moving from one subject to another subject. They're even more important in a speech because your audience doesn't have a script in front of them. All they're able to do is listen to you. So you have to verbally and very clearly tell them that I'm going from one part of my topic to the next part of my topic. And as you look through here, you'll find that there are 4 transition statements in the speech. 1 between the introduction and body section 1, 1 between body section 1 and body section 2, 1 between body section 2 and body section 3, and 1 between body section 3 and the conclusion. The most important factor for your transition statements are that 1, it needs to be very clear. I do not want my audience to miss the transition statement, or they might get lost in my speech and not understand what it is that I'm trying to tell them. The second thing is that a transition statement should tell me where I'm coming from as well as where I'm going to. So for instance, a very generic statement that I could make is, now that I'm done introducing you to my topic, let's get into the first body section. So again, now that I've done this, let's do this. Okay? And now my audience has a very clear and verbal connection to the fact that I'm moving on to another part of my topic. In reality, though, you're going to be a little bit less generic than that, and you're going to tie your transitions into the topic that you're talking about. So if I was doing a speech on, let's say, giving a basic income to senior citizens, all senior citizens. So my thesis statement would be, in this speech, I will persuade you that all senior citizens should be given $2,000 a month by the government. A transition statement would be, well, now that I'm introducing you to to the topic about giving senior citizens $2,000 a month, let's go into the first section, which explains why, without this money, senior citizens are suffering. Okay, so it's the same thing, it's the same formula, but it's less generic, it's more specifically tailored to the topic that I'm talking about. And then my second transition might be, now that I'm done explaining to you how senior citizens are suffering without a basic income, let's talk about why there isn't currently a policy to provide this to them. Right? Now that I'm doing this, let's move on to this. Okay? And again, that formula is going to be true for all 4 of your transition statements. Now, in order to work on this the best, let's go ahead and move into the conclusion, and I'll come back to the body sections. So the first thing in your conclusion is the review section. And this is actually parallel to the preview section. So a lot of times when people see the word review, they actually think summary, and they think that they're supposed to kind of re-explain all of the topic that they just gave to us. But that's not what you're supposed to do in the review. The review is very specific, and it is the past tense version of the preview. So whereas the preview says, first I'm going to talk about this, second I'm going to talk about this, and third I'm going to talk about this, your review says, first I talked about this, second I talked about this, and third I talked about this. In other words, you're going to review the 3 body sections that you went through during your speech. So redundancy is something that's very important in public speaking, because we want to make sure that the audience remembers the most important parts of our speech. And we know from earlier in this semester that the audience will retain less than 50% of the information that we give them during our speech. And that's just an hour later. Tomorrow, they'll wake up with only 20% of the information we've given them. So we want to make sure they understand what the main points of our speech were. So we call that redundancy in speaking. And so the preview tells them what we're going to tell them. Then in the body sections, we tell them what we came to tell them. And then our review tells them what we just told them. And so there's 3 times in the speech that we're going to cover what are the 3 main points of this speech, right? And hopefully through that repetition and through that redundancy, they're more able to remember and prioritize that information over some of the details or the minor information that they might forget. Now, after we give a clear and concise review of first I talked about this, second I talked about this, and third I talked about this, now we're getting into the summary, which is where we kind of wrap it all up and give a moral to the story. So my favorite way to kind of explain this is from a show that most of you probably don't watch anymore, and that's the Jerry Springer Show. So the Jerry Springer Show is an old TV talk show where the host is named Jerry Springer, and he has guests on who go through all sorts of drama. Usually that drama is connected to family issues or issues with spouses, and is something like, oh, well, my brother or my husband cheated on me with my sister, or that we had a baby, I thought it was mine, it turns out I don't think it's mine. And the whole show is confrontation of the different people in this conflict to see who's right, who's wrong, and whose baby is it. In other words, it is just absolutely drama. Usually, and they have bodyguards on the show because almost every show there's a fight, physical confrontation with people trying to kick each other's butts. In other words, it's just a bunch of drama. And it's the kind of show we watch to make us feel better about our lives, right? Well, at the end of all of this drama, at the end of this show, there's about a 30-second summary that Jerry Springer gives called Jerry Springer's Final Thoughts. And he wraps the entire show up into a 30-second kind of clear, here's what we learned today. And so again, we're talking about the moral of the story, and we're talking about what we learned today. Ivan?
Can you please give your measure to us?
Yes, there's a measure right over there against the wall. It's the metal stick. Sorry about that. All right, and close the door when you leave. It's on the other side. That's now recorded for everyone.
The which metal stick?
The big one.
This one?
No, the big metal bar that looks like an L with the numbers on it. Okay, so all right. So the summary again is the moral of the story, and essentially what have we learned over the course of the 6 to 8 minute speech. And it's about 20 to 30 seconds long, where we kind of summarize everything. The importance of the summary, though, is to bring up no new points. So we're not bringing up new information. We're just wrapping up all the information that we've learned and kind of summarizing the most important points of what we've learned. Then the last thing, again, is the attention getter. And I've already talked about this, and this is where we allude back to the original attention getter that we started the whole speech off with, right? We're bringing the speech full circle, and we know that the audience really wants to know that the speech has been completed, and that kind of creates a sense of completion in the audience's mind and kind of makes us feel like the speech is finished. All right, so now let's go into the 3 body sections. And it is a little bit complicated, and we're going to try to work through this as clearly as we can. But first of all, before we look at the specifics, I just want to emphasize that there are 3 themes that we're going to be talking about. And so the first theme is that we're going to try to present a problem to the audience. We want the audience to feel like there is a problem that exists that demands our attention. In other words, we want to make them think that something is on fire. Right? We want them to think, uh-oh, there's a really big problem that exists. And that's the entire flavor or theme of our first body section. There is a problem, right? And that's where we're talking about how bad the problem is. In the second body section, we're going to be talking about the cause of that problem. So why is there a fire? What started the fire? What allows that fire to continue to go, right? In other words, once we tell them what the problem is, we have to explain to them why that problem exists, right? And then the third section is a solution to that problem. And this makes sense because in order to know how to solve the problem, we need to know why the problem exists. We have to be able to solve the root cause of that problem. Now, you can actually switch the order of those first 2 body sections. So maybe I could talk about the cause of something and then explain how bad that problem really is, and then I could get to how to solve the problem. Typically, though, people switch those around based on how they feel about, how they want to approach the speech. For me, I actually like to start with the problem because I think that's what gets the audience most interested. So if I can get them to be a little bit worried or concerned about something that is real and happening, then I can talk to them about what caused the problem. But again, that's interchangeable. And in fact, in this outline, the first section is the cause of the problem. The second section is the impact or the harm of that problem that it creates. And finally, the third body section is the solution to that problem. So in order to kind of understand how this is formulated, we need to learn the substructure of this argument. And so I'm going to skip down here a little bit, and we're going to focus on a different concept called claim, evidence, and reasoning. And the entire speech is formulated on this standard. So a claim is a concise statement of advocacy. And it's in essence the beginning to an argument, but it doesn't have any of the reasons why that argument is true. So for instance, I could say, dogs are a person's best friend. That's a claim. Strawberry ice cream is better than chocolate ice cream. That's a claim. Coffee is essential to start your day. That's a claim. Now, the thing about a claim is that it, again, is unsupported, but more importantly, it's controversial. It's not proven yet. And so there are logical counterclaims to that claim. So for instance, when I say strawberry ice cream is better than chocolate ice cream, I'm sure some of you are like, chocolate ice cream is better than strawberry ice cream. So again, some people might agree with my statement, but others will disagree. But either way, I haven't provided specific reasons why that argument is true yet, right? So a claim is just a one-sentence statement of advocacy. So in this case, I'll write dogs are a human's best friend. Okay? So some of you might agree with that. Some of you might disagree with that. But the evidence for that is yet to be determined. So the evidence would be the factual information that supports that claim or the expert opinions that support that claim, right? Or the concrete information that provides support for that statement. So in this case, I would say something like, according to Pet Society, I don't know if that's actually a real thing, dogs are the most loyal animals that can be pets. Okay? So this is where I've appealed to a credible source that has expert information that says that dogs are the most loyal pet, right? But even then, the connection between the claim and the evidence are still controversial. Does that evidence really prove that claim to be true is the question. And so the reasoning is where we provide the value relationship between those two things. Friendship, so this is where I'd say loyalty is the most important aspect of friendship. And this is where I'm just emphasizing that loyalty, in my opinion, is the most important part of what makes a friend. Therefore, since dogs are the most loyal, they are our best friends, right? So now this series of arguments that has 3 steps comes together to formulate a strong argument. Now, if I wanted to disprove this argument, I probably am not going to be able to disprove the evidence. That's the strongest part of this argument. Now, maybe I could find an article by Cat Society that says cats are actually more loyal than dogs, but we all know that's not true. Cats don't care about you. Just kidding. But for instance, this is a credible source, and it's probably not going to be as easily disputed as the value relationship. So really, if we want to attack an argument, we are not going to have as much success attacking the factual portion or the credible information that provides our evidence, but rather we're going to attack an argument based on the relationship between the evidence and the claim. And in this case, I think it would be pretty easy to make the argument that loyalty isn't really what makes a friendship. Loyalty is obedience, and loyalty is about one person having control over the other, and best friends don't control each other, right? So trust is probably a more important factor to friendship than loyalty is. And in this case, that would disprove the connection between the claim and the evidence, right? So how does this function within this outline? Well, first of all, I want to draw your attention to the fact that there are 3 levels of claim, evidence, and reasoning occurring in this speech. Well, actually, let me go back because I want to show you one more thing. If I am successful in connecting these 3 pieces of the argument together, the claim is converted into evidence. Now it becomes uncontroversial because I've proven it to be true. And what can I do now that that claim has been converted to evidence? I can build a new claim on top of it. Everyone should go buy a dog because my evidence is that dogs are a human's best friend. And since we all want a best friend, you should go out and buy a dog, right? So the idea here is what we call argument chaining, or converting claims to evidence and then building new claims on top of those. Okay, so that becomes important as we look at this outline. So usually this is in class where I ask someone to guess where is the first and most important claim in the entire speech. But since I know that that's not going to happen, I will just tell you. Our thesis statement is our claim. I'm going to persuade you that we should do this thing, right? That's controversial. I haven't proven it to you yet. I've told you I'm going to, but I still have to do that, right? So the thesis statement is essentially our original and most prevalent claim in the speech. The body claims then become the evidence after it's converted that supports the thesis statement. And the summary is like the reasoning that ties those 3 body sections or pieces of evidence into my thesis statement. Then if we look at it at the level of the body section, our body section starts with a claim. Our subclaims are the claims that will be converted to evidence and support the body claim. And the tie into topic is the reasoning that ties our two subclaims into our major body claim. And then you can see very clearly that we have a subclaim, evidence, and reasoning, which resembles the most micro form of this argument that we're making. So our subclaim, and let's kind of see how this works together, right? So I'm going to do a little bit silly. My thesis statement is that sandwiches are great, okay? My first body claim might be peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, are great. My first body claim might be peanut butter is very healthy. My evidence, according to Jiffy, peanut butter has real protein. Reasoning, protein is key to building muscles, or key to a body's health. All right, so if we just look at it at the subclaim level, peanut butter is very healthy. According to Jiffy, peanut butter has real protein. Protein is key to a body's health, therefore, peanut butter is healthy. Now, the bigger claim is peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are great. So what else do I need to prove in order to prove that peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are great? Jelly is healthy. That's the other part of the equation. And in order to prove that, Smucker's argues that jelly has real fruit. Fruit is also a key to healthy bodies. All right? So again, at the subclaim level, jelly is healthy. Smucker's argues that jelly has real fruit and healthy is part of an important body. That's consistent on itself. That makes an argument. And that converts that subclaim to evidence. And then on top of that, peanut butter is healthy. And this argument is internally consistent. That converts the subclaim to evidence. So now our body claim, which is peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are great, has two bits of supporting evidence to support it. And then in my tie into topic, I explain, since peanut butter is healthy and jelly is healthy, combining them into a sandwich means that PB and jelly sandwiches are healthy. Now I have a body claim that has been proven true because it has two pieces of evidence and a reasoning section that ties it all together. Now, does that prove that sandwiches are great? No, because that's just one kind of sandwich, right? So what do I need to do? I need to prove through body claim 2 and body claim 3 that there are other good sandwiches. So maybe my second body claim is ham and cheese sandwiches are healthy. And then I would go through the steps again. Ham is healthy, according to, Porky Pig. Ham is, whatever. And I'll go through those steps again. I'll do the same thing with body section number 3, or body claim number 3. And now I have 3 examples of sandwiches that are healthy. And in my summary section, I would explain how those 3 examples provide proof that overall sandwiches are great. So hopefully you can kind of see how the claim evidence reasoning is done at 3 different levels within my speech, and that there's no claim that I'm going to make in my speech that does not get supported by evidence and reasoning. Okay? I'm going to back up here. Okay. So now getting back a little bit into the flavor of these topics. So again, in this section, I'm saying body claim number 1 is about the cause of a problem. And since we're doing policy speeches, the cause of the problem is always the policy that's causing the problem. So for instance, if my speech was about reforming the 3 strikes law, in this section, I would be talking about how the 3 strikes law is leading to the problem that I described in my harm section. However, there's also 2 different ways that that cause can be described. The first is the structural, which is the policy that I'm talking about, or the lack of a policy that there should be. And then the next stage is the attitudinal inherency, which is inherency is just a fancy word for cause. And so I'm talking first about the policy that causes the problem, but then I'm also talking about how the attitudes of people also creates that problem, right? So for instance, the 3 strikes law, why did people support it in the first place? Well, because they found that people weren't going to jail after committing 3 felonies. People were doing all these crimes and they were still getting let out of prison. And so the attitude of people was, no, we have to punish them. We have to set an example. And if we make it a huge example, people will not do it anymore, right? But that hasn't necessarily turned out to be true. However, that's the attitude that created this problem in the first place. So first, in my first subclaim, I'm going to be talking about the current policy or the lack of a policy and how that causes the problem. I'm going to back that up with an according to statement or a reference to evidence. I'm going to cite my source at this point. So every time you see the word evidence in this outline, that's an indication that you're going to be citing a source of evidence to prove that argument true. That's going to be referring to your articles, your journals, your books, or whatever you've gotten as research. And as you'll note, there are 6 spaces. You see the word evidence. That means you have to have a minimum of 6 citations during your speech. So then moving on to the body claim number 2 is where we're emphasizing the problem or how big the problem is and how big the problem will become if we don't solve it. We're talking about the problem both in quantitative and qualitative terms. And so these are, again, fancy words that have pretty simple meanings. Quantitative just means how many people are going to be affected by this problem. So it's a kind of where we're throwing in the statistics of how many people have been hurt or how many people will be hurt if we don't do anything. And qualitative has to do with how it affects the quality of a person's life. So usually at this point, I talk about the common cold as an example to illustrate this, because quantitatively speaking, the common cold is huge. Everybody gets a cold at some point in their life. We've all had one. We'll all get another one at some point, right? So the cold affects everybody. Quantitatively speaking, it is like 100%. It affects every person in the world. Doesn't get much bigger than that, right? Qualitatively speaking, though, the effects of a cold are fairly minor, right? You know, we have a few days off of work, we are congested, we're a little bit miserable, it sucks, but it's not as bad of a problem as, for instance, being, shot, with a bullet. That would be worse than a cold, right? So qualitatively speaking, a cold is not as significant as some other problems are, even though quantitatively speaking, it is the biggest problem we face, right? So when you're describing the problem that you're trying to solve, you want to explain how many people does it affect, quantitatively speaking, and B, qualitatively speaking, how badly does it affect those people, right? And so again, that gives you both a ability to talk about how widespread the problem is, as well as how bad that problem is to have. Okay? Then in your solvency section or your third body section, we're going to introduce the audience to the policy that we want to pass and how it would work, why it's a good idea, right? So how is this policy going to solve this problem? And then we also recognize that we're not the government and we can't pass policies ourselves. So we're going to provide the audience with an individual action that they can take in order to help create that solution. Whether that's you should write to your senator, you should call the president, you should sign my petition, you should go to a protest this weekend, whatever it is, how can I get involved to put pressure on the government to pass this policy, right? So we're going to say, here's the policy and why it's a good idea, but then also, what can you do if you agree with me in order to help us get this policy passed? Okay. And so that's this 2 subclaims for my body sections. So one other thing that we need to talk about is according to statements. So when we're doing evidence, when we're citing our sources, we need to cite 2 pieces of information about my source. So I could say, according to John Johnson, in an article titled "Why We Should Ban Germline Modification," right? So that, in that case, I'm giving you the author's name and the name of the article. I could also include things like, so I got the author's name, I could do the name of the article or book, I can do the year it was published, I could do the credentials of the author, I could do the source, like New York Times. So basically, and there are others, but these are the main ones I think that you should focus on. And so when you're introducing or citing the source that you're getting the information from, you need to give me any 2 pieces of this information. And so you could say, according to the author's name and the title of the book, according to the title of the book and the year it was published, according to the author's name and their credentials, according to the title of the book and the source that it came from. So any combination of those 2 pieces or that information, you need to give me 2 pieces of that information. And you also don't need to say according to every time, although you need something that's similar to that. You could say so-and-so argues that. You could say information that I found from, or supporting information. So there's 100 ways to say according to, right? In other words, without being redundant, without using the same phrase every single time. But it is important that the audience understands that you're citing sources at this point. So you do want to err on the side of clarity for this. So again, there are 6 places where you need to cite evidence, and you need a minimum of 5 sources. So you might cite one of your sources twice, according to the same article that I cited above by John Johnson on germline modification. Cool, right? So you need a minimum of 5 different sources, and you need to cite at least 6 times in your speech. All right, I think that covers that. Okay, so I know that's a lot to cover, and this is a really poor format for this because I'd be answering questions during class and making sure I'm understanding everything that you're worried about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this, and I think there's been some questions in the chat box, and I'm going to go through those real quick. So I'm going to stop share, and I'm going to look at the chat and see if there's any questions. Okay, so Anel says my microphone isn't working, but she wants to legalize euthanasia. Okay, you can do that. Jessica Tuck just said, can you say that again? I can, if you tell me what it is you want me to say. And then another question was given to me, how can we add an interview that we did from an expert? Okay, so basically you would just cite that interview the same way you would cite a source. So according to an interview I did with Julie Johnson from the New York Times, or according, so again, you're just giving me 2 pieces of evidence about that and letting me know that you interviewed that person. Now, it is also important because in truth, we are going to need to have a manuscript of an interview. So if you have an interview, you need to record that interview either by, recording it with a film or writing it out word for word so that we can verify that that's something that person actually said, so that you're not just making up the interview. So if you are planning to do an interview, make sure you ask that person if you can record them. and that you do record that interview so that if there was any question about the authenticity of that material, that you could prove that out in the future. Okay. Are we going to screen share our speech when we are presenting? So no. Essentially, when you present, you're going to film it and you're going to send it to me. Okay, so those you're going to be sending me your filmed speeches that you give, and then you're going to upload them onto Canvas. So if we had a good article, can we take 2 pieces of info from it and use it as part of our 6 citations? Yes. So you can definitely cite a source more than once. And again, the rules are you need a minimum of 5 sources and you need to cite at least 6 times. So these outlines will be due on Tuesday, a week from today. So again, you've already chosen your topic, and over the weekend you got started doing some research. So now you're just going to transition that research into the outlines. And you will be turning those in Tuesday, a week from today. And then again, we will be doing some work together to review them. And then you'll be able to resubmit a final version on Thursday of next week. So we're going to have them due on Tuesday. We're going to spend some time fixing them, making sure that they're done correctly, because obviously, you know, we're probably not going to do them perfectly the first time. So we're going to try to catch those mistakes, fix them, and have them due again on Thursday. I need to get mine approved. Can I do mine about the treatment and living conditions of people in immigrant custody? Okay, so for the person who asked me that question, again, you want to phrase that in the form of a persuasive speech. So you would say, in this speech, I will persuade you that we need a law that gives better treatment and living conditions for people in immigrant custody, or something of that nature. So again, you need to change a law relevant to that subject. And if you have any questions, you can go ahead and talk to me about that on the side. Okay, so I think I've answered all the questions. If I haven't, please repeat your question so I don't forget it. And at this point, what I want to do is I want to show you the example that I have. So let me screen share this.
Wait, I had a question.
Okay.
When and where will you be posting these screen recorded meetings?
I will just after class. It takes a little while for it to get back to me. Zoom has this thing where they basically create a little manuscript of it for ADA compliance. And then once I get a message that it's finished, I'll just go ahead and post it under the announcements.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so this is a speech example that I wrote about asteroids, right? All of you are so worried about asteroids hitting the Earth, I'm sure. Probably something we don't often think about, but I thought it might be a good example and not steal a topic that somebody would write a speech on. And so I'm not going to read through the entire thing here, but I do want to emphasize a few things. Again, I didn't write anything next to the word introductions. That's actually not a place I'm writing. So I'm only writing next to the points here. And I actually tied my significance in here. So I didn't have that on a separate thing. So again, attention getter, what if I told you that there was something that what if I told you there was something that no one could see or hear or touch that existed that could one day cause extinction on Earth? That's a poorly written sentence. Your grade is already going down, teacher. But again, I'm trying to get you like, what are you talking about? What could he possibly be referring to that I can't see, I can't hear, I can't touch, but it could lead to extinction, right? And so that is supposed to create that information hunger, right? And so now you're like, well, what is it that he's talking about? Now I want to know, right? And so now I've got you hooked, and hopefully you'll be a little bit more interested in my speech. Then I hit you over the head with my topic. In this speech, I will persuade you that the United States should do something to keep us safe from an asteroid. Okay. I give us some background. As long as people have looked up at the sky, we've been curious about the heavens. Great, da 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 da. And so now I've given you a little bit of context that gets you ready to listen to my speech. Then again, in my preview, it's very formulaic. In order to persuade you that we need to do something about this, first, I will. Second, I will. And finally, I will give you the solution. So again, first, I'm going to tell you how bad it would be. Second, I'm going to tell you what the cause of the problem is. And finally, I'm going to give you a solution to that problem. Transition. Now that I've introduced you to my topic, let's talk about what is lurking in outer space. All right? So where am I coming from? And where am I going? I'll let you go through the body sections on your own time. But I do want to highlight that I like to highlight or make bold somehow my according to statements. These are the citations. And this is important because if you're going to be using an outline to deliver your speech, you're going to need to be talking to us and making eye contact. You can't just read your speech to us, right? You're delivering a speech. You're not reading a speech. And so anything you can do to kind of make these jump out at you. So when you're looking at your outline to find your place or find your information, the citations are the most important thing that you need to be able to accurately and specifically cite. So you might want to kind of give me a highlight on those. So again, everything you'll see here that's highlighted. Again, every time you see the word evidence, I also have a citation. All right. So again, my claim is controversial. Not only is an asteroid impact likely, it would be devastating. Prove it. Okay, well, here's my evidence. And here's my explanation for why that evidence proves my claim. And then the hardest part, oops, no. My example is actually missing tie into topics. So make sure you add the tie into topic sections. Where you explain why this subclaim and the first subclaim prove the body claim to be true. All right, so that's the problem. And then I have, so here's the problem. We're all going to die. What's the why the problem exists? Well, the U.S. hasn't done anything to prioritize stopping an asteroid. And then my plan, my policy, the United States must address this. The policy is NASA should double its budget and create an Earth defense system to protect us from potential asteroids. And then it is essential that we create this infrastructure. My conclusion, again, that's a formula. First, I did this. Second, I did this. And lastly, or third, I did this. This is where I tell my story and leave you with my final message in the summary. And then I went back to my attention getter to talk about that thing you can't touch, you can't smell, and you can't hear. So I will be posting on an announcement both the outline as well as this example so that you can look through there and kind of use it as a model for your own speech. So then on Thursday, what I'll do is I'll just be here on Zoom to help you all with your individual work. So hopefully you've made a little bit of progress. And if you have questions that right now seem to be answered, but when you get to it, you'll be like, oh yeah, I don't understand that. That's when you'll be able to ask me those questions on Thursday. And then again, this is due in a rough draft version on Tuesday of next week. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, and then I'll answer any questions you all have before we leave.